Well, greetings out there in YouTube land, and welcome to a new project that I think will be of interest to those of you who enjoy converting PA and other types of amplifiers into guitar amps. This is a Bell & Howell Filmosound Model 385 amplifier, and it was actually built into a big 16mm projector and was used to take the sound information off the side of the film and actually turn it into audible sound to accompany the video part of the film. Probably 8 or 10 years ago, a fellow named Bernie Rostig in Canada started making guitar amps out of these, and I don't know how many he made, probably 10 or 20, but they became very, very popular and actually rather famous. Since then, it seems like interest in this particular amp has sort of gone by the wayside, and maybe we can rekindle some of that interest with a video series. So let's take a look at this little rascal, and it is little because, as you can see, compared to my hand, for an 18-watt amp, this is on the small side. And we'll see what are the good points, what has to be done to convert it to guitar use, and also I think what are some of the challenging issues with this amp that will make it a little more difficult maybe than some other conversions. Let's start out with a real close-up tour inside and out of this amp chassis and circuit. As you can see, there is a louvered metal panel on the bottom, and this is how the amplifier is attached to the projector under normal conditions. There's a really nice looking little control panel that says Filmosound amplifier. We've got a on-off switch, a tone control combination, volume control, and a microphone input, which works just fine for our 1/4-inch guitar input jack. You can see we've got a really large power transformer here with the flux bands, very high quality from the number on top, which is 606-823. We know this is a Schumacher transformer. That's 606, made in the 23rd week of 1958. This is a late 50s amplifier, which would coincide with the tweed era in Fender amps. And I've heard that this amp is supposed to be able to come up with tone which is very, very close to what the Fender tweed amps, especially the deluxe, sounded like. As you'll see, the circuit is not that much like a deluxe, but yet it is famous for that type of tone. We have a 5Y3 rectifier tube, a pair of 6V6s with a good size output transformer, so they're in push-pull, and we've got a pair of 12AX7s. One is for preamplification and one is for phase inversion. What sets this circuit aside, in my opinion, is a 5879 pentode first preamp tube in a rubber-mounted base because the tube tends to be microphonic. Now there's 3 other features on top of this chassis which are used strictly for projector use, and they include this jack, which is an output jack for an oscillator that is built in. I'll show you in a minute when we flip it over. Back here is a socket for a 6V6 tube, which is actually the tube that is used to produce the oscillation output, which helps this circuit read the sound information that's on the side of the film. And then over here is another socket for it to connect to the projector. As I said, none of these 3 structures are generally of any use if you're going to use this as a guitar amplifier. One that may be of use is a little pot that's located down below, a little trim pot, and it allows you to adjust to minimize the hum in the paired 6V6 output tubes. Got around a 1 amp fuse, and this is where the AC cord would plug into the chassis. I think you realize we're going to have to change and install a 3-wire power cord in place of this. We've got the wonderful Underwriter Laboratories seal of approval. And then one thing that's nice but sort of an annoyance is these are the speaker outputs for single speaker or dual speaker, but unfortunately the diameter is too small on the jack to accept the normal 1/4 inch jack. So we're going to have to install a more customary type of speaker output jack in place of either of these. Okay, now let's pull that louvered bottom pan and take a look inside. Before I do that, I had to remove the tubes. We've got two really nice RCA 12 AX7s, and notice the original Bell Howell 6V6s and 5Y3. I believe that these tubes were also made by RCA. Now, because they use rubber grommets in the holes in this base plate, it's possible that there is no metal-to-metal contact between the base plate and the chassis. So to be sure that it's grounded for best silencing of hum, they've soldered a grounding wire to it, which I will have to unsolder. Okay, here's the inside of the chassis, and as you can see, it's extremely congested. Very cluttered. They had to make this unit small enough to fit inside the base of a projector, and in so doing they really crowded the components together, and I think that is going to make this a very challenging conversion for a beginner. This is probably one of those conversions that might be better for somebody with a little more experience. Down here is the socket for the 6V6 oscillator tube that we do not need for guitar use. Here is the oscillator coil, and this unit is to help the amplifier pick up the audio information from the side of the video film. Got our big can capacitors here, and we notice that the power supply is isolated from the rest of the signal portion of the amp by this metal partition, which is always a good idea. We've got our two speaker outputs here, but the diameter of the input opening is just too small for 1/4 inch jacks. If you have the smaller jack, great. I don't, so I'm going to have to change this one into a ungrounded 1/4 inch speaker output jack. Down here we have that hum balancing pot, the two 6V6 tube sockets, and the two 12AX7 tube sockets. As you can see, everything's so close together, this would be no fun to work on to try to change components down here to any of these tube bases. We've got a bunch of those disc capacitors and some of the old waxy style caps. Now that we've documented what this amplifier looks like as it comes from Bell & Howell, let's now discuss the sort of bare minimum changes that we have to make to turn this into a guitar amplifier. Number one, you're going to have to run a 3-wire power cord into this. You could either go into where the old receptacle is or over here where the adjustment is for the oscillator, but that's going to be a must. Number two, you're going to have to install a 1/4 inch speaker output jack either here or here. Number three, we already have our volume, our on-off, and our tone. Also we have our guitar input. About the only thing that you might want to add would be a pilot light of some sort if you wanted, and that would be optional. Lately Jack has been practicing his concealment skills. As you can see here, it'd be very difficult to tell that there was a cat anywhere in this bathroom. We can, however, peek behind the towel, and what a surprise, there's a black kitty. Oh, Jackie. Now, we're all pretty much on the same boat because I have never worked on one of these before in my life. So if you're going to try a conversion, we'll both be doing it at the same time. And what I'm going to do now is turn off the camera and do my modifications that I just discussed with you to turn this into a basic guitar amplifier. We can connect a guitar to it, see how it sounds. Then we can start looking at the circuit and see if there's ways that we can modify it to produce a better tone or maybe more volume or something that suits us a little better. And then finally, I really have a harebrained idea. I hate to see this socket go to the waste. This is the oscillator tube socket, which we're not going to use. I'm wondering if I couldn't use this exact socket, plug in a 6SL7 duo triode tube, which is much like a 12AX7, just older and bigger, and turn this into a tremolo section down here. Get rid of the coil and some other things, but actually have a two-stage tremolo added to this amp circuit. It would be one of a kind. I don't think anybody else has ever tried this, and I might find out why when I try it. But anyway, that's down the road a ways, but I just wanted to kind of tease you with that idea. Another thing I'm seeing for this is maybe building a small champ-like cabinet in which this hangs with this side up at the rear, exposed with a cutout from the top of the cabinet, so that you can get in here. Maybe you have the tremolo controls over here or a pilot light. This then would be covered by the back panel, and the transformers and tubes would be projecting forward toward the speaker. So there's all kinds of neat possibilities for this little rascal, and if that sounds interesting to you, then stay tuned, and I'll be right back with step one, which will be a conversion of this to a basic guitar amplifier. Okay, step one, I removed the oscillation coil, and I drilled out the rivets and removed the oscillation trim pot, and ran my power cord in through a strain relief inside and wired it up with the green wire bolted down to the chassis as a ground. Removing that oscillation coil gave me some room here to maneuver my wires and do some soldering. Now I'm ready to install the ungrounded speaker jack. I removed the small diameter jack, and now I'm going to install the 1/4 inch jack in that hole. But something came up here that is very important in the way that we wire this jack. Okay, looking at the schematic, which we'll discuss in greater detail later, we see that there are two separate impedances from this output transformer secondary. We've got a 16 ohm winding that's a green wire. We've got an 8 ohm winding that's a yellow wire, and then the common black. Now, since I want 8 ohms across this jack, the single jack, I'm going to attach the yellow to the signal leaf here and the black to the outer shield. That will turn this single output jack from a 16 ohm to an 8 ohm. Okay, looking into the chassis, this is the yellow 8 ohm lead. It was connected to the lug right here on the dual output jack. I disconnected it. I'm going to bring it over here and attach it to my signal lug right here on my new 8 ohm output jack. The black grounded lead will go here to the shield lug. Okay, and here we have the yellow wire to the signal leaf, black wire to the shield. The 8 ohm output jack to our speaker is all wired and ready to go. And because I use these lugs to solder in my new power cord, I made a little rubber cap that goes over those two prongs out here so that nobody will accidentally touch them and get shocked. Here's a tip that might save you a few bucks. I was looking at the smaller diameter input jack and noticed that the outside diameter is the same as the 1/4 inch jack. So I simply ran a 1/4 inch bit through the center of the jack, and now it can accommodate the 1/4 inch plug with no trouble at all. And here's another bad sign. If you look at that black material it is extruding out of the large electrolytic can capacitor, that's a pretty good indication that this capacitor is failing, and all the more reason to replace it. And due to the horizontal mounting of these capacitors and the density of components around their terminals, this will not be an easy job. Now we'll get a baseline sound check on the amp. All that's been changed is the output jack for the speaker and the 3-wire cord. Let's see how it sounds. Well, that's about it for this part 1 video in the Bell & Howell Filmosound 385 amp conversion video series. In part 2, we're going to replace the filter caps. In this case, all 4 symptoms of leaky filter caps were present. Rather elevated ESR values. The cans themselves became hot to the touch. The power transformer got hot rather quickly because of the current leakage through the can caps. We could see the black extruded material coming from within the capacitors. And finally, there was a 120 cycle hum from the speaker. Next, I'm going to check the tube bias on the 6V6s. They are cathode biased, but I noticed that one of the tubes particularly got very, very hot. Both of them heated up, but one just got really, really hot and really quickly. I think it's drawing too much current. And then third, and most important, we're going to go into the circuit of this, look at the schematic, and figure out ways to make it sound better. In my opinion, the tone is extremely compressed so that it's mainly mid-range. This was probably done because the movies that this projector would show would not exactly have hi-fi sound. It'd be primarily frequencies from probably, say, 200 to 4,000 or 5,000 cycles per second. To get that sparkle that we need for our amp use, we're going to have to check into the negative feedback loop that this amp has, which I think really stifles its tone. Now, I grant you that while the specific details of this video do relate to this particular amplifier, the methods used can be applied to virtually any amplifier conversion. So if this sounds interesting, then please stay tuned for part 2. Rusty, Jack, and I appreciate your continued interest and look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Bye for now.
Where is it?
Okay, just one more. Good one. Good catch.